So a typical example is someone known as Phineas Gage. Phineas Gage. So let me try and type what the name for Phineas Gage. Phineas Gage. So you can read more about Phineas Gage. So Phineas Gage was a construction worker in the US. And apparently, one day he went to working at the construction work. Then by accident, a hot iron rod pierced through his cheek to his frontal lobe. So this drawing that or thing that I've indicated, the skull of Phineas Gage, where the iron rod pierced from his cheekbone to the frontal lobe, which is this area. And since the iron rod was really, really hot, it cauterized most of the tissues within Phineas Gage brain. So it means that to some extent, let me say it healed those aspects. Let me put it in a fashion. When I say something cauterized, like when someone gets an open wound, you know, back in several years, they would use a hot metal. They would insert that hot metal onto the wound as a way to seal it. The same thing applies to Phineas Gage. That's what the iron rod did. So they realized that Phineas Gage personalities and everything changed. So sometimes he swears within some little altercations he would have with his colleagues. So his personality and everything changed. So that was when scientists were able to know that, oh, the frontal lobe is the one responsible for that. So when there's a damage in the frontal lobe, people are disinhibited. They swear anyhow. They do things without even thinking about it. That's what we mean by it is disinhibited. They do things without really thinking about it. So the frontal lobe inhibits you from doing certain things which society frowns upon. But when it is lesioned, then you do such things. So it was through Phineas Gage issue that scientists were able to find out that, oh, the frontal lobe is the one responsible for inhibiting certain things society frowns upon. Because in his situation, it was damaged. So he could do things anyhow. Then there's also another case whereby you can also read more about it. We call the person Henry Molassen. In most books, we shorten his name as HM due to ethics. He just died some few years ago. That was when we were able to discover that his name is Henry Molassen. But since he was alive, most books or most researchers refer to him as HM because we didn't want people to discover his real identity. So when it comes to Henry Molassen, several years ago, he had seizures like epilepsy, let me put it in that fashion. And during that time, when someone gets seizures, what scientists normally do is that they would operate an area known as the temporal lobe in the brain. So they will remove the temporal lobe. So you can just search for temporal lobe where it is located. So it is around the ear section. I think I've switched on my video so you can just observe. Within this area at the brain is what is referred to as the temporal lobe. So interestingly, these scientists remove the left and right temporal lobe of HM. And when they removed, they realized that HM was having difficulties recalling certain information, sometimes personal information which is supposed to be easy for him to recall. He was having difficulties. So when you ask him, okay, last year, how did you even celebrate your birthday? HM wouldn't be able to recollect. And as I'm teaching with you right now, I'm teaching you right now. Let's say within 5 minutes, I taught HM some info, one or two things. Within 5 minutes, I'll ask HM, so what did you learn? Or what were we learning? HM wouldn't be able to recall anything. He might perceive that, it is a new, he has met me for the first time. He doesn't. So please, this is something I'm pleading. The moment you join, please make sure that you mute your mic, because always, if care is not taken, it will be disrupting. So please, the moment you join, make sure that you mute, or else I need to come back, mute you all, which also disrupts. Exactly. So I think someone is doing the same thing. The person just joined, didn't mute herself.
Let's give to it.
Okay. So this is what's really happened. HM situation, as they cut the temporal lobe, he was having difficulties recalling. Even when he meets scientists today, and the following day, the same scientists come to him, and HM might perceive the scientist as what? As a new person altogether, as if he hasn't even met him before, because he can't really recall. His memory has been lost and all that, some information. So that was when scientists were able to discover that, there's this portion within the temporal lobe known as the hippocampus. And its main function is to help us to recall information. So hippocampus is usually responsible for memory. For you to memorize anything, it means that your hippocampus is the one helping you to memorize. So that was when scientists were able to discover that, so during the operation of HM, these surgeons took out the hippocampus, which can be found in the temporal lobe. And that's why HM is having difficulties recalling certain information. So these were some of the few instances whereby we're able to use humans, especially, to understand how the brain really functions. But in most situations, for us to understand the brain, is either we go in for an animal, or sometimes we need to wait till a human dies. Then we can do autopsies and understand how the brain really functions. A typical case is Albert Einstein. When he died, the family members gave consent for us to understand how his brain is all about, the structure of his brain and all that. So it's only some rare situations that sometimes humans are used for us to understand the brain. So these are the two main arguments. Some people feel that, okay, we using animals in any experiment is not useful. Others also believe that, it is useful, we should still use them. So these are the two main arguments. And they all give different reasons as to why we should use animals or we shouldn't use. And that's what today's discussion was centered on. Okay. So for instance, those who are they're seriously against these animals, we're using them. They are more or less like animal activists. So you see them with placards like this, seriously protesting that, animals also have rights, so why should we use them? So sometimes they demonstrate against even scientists using animals in certain research and all that, because to them it is not right. So those who agree that we should use animals in research, these are some of the arguments they bring up. So that's why I've heading it, why psychologists study animals. So they believe that, we should use animals in research. So the first reason they give is that it's based on Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. So according to Charles Darwin, he believes that both humans and animals, we all come from the same ancestry. Okay. So when you check, I think those who read history back in SHS will be more familiar with this. We call something known as man-apes. Apes. And we normally say that they are the stone-aged men. Stone-aged men. Because back in the Stone Age period, whereby back in several thousands of years ago, humans, our physique and everything were more or less like chimpanzees, were closer to chimpanzees. That's the Stone Age men or the man apes. They were closer to chimpanzees. But as time went on, we evolved. So this is a Stone Age man, but as time went by, we evolved until we got to this period. So that's what Charles Darwin talks about. He's saying that, oh, even these Stone Age men were closer to chimpanzees. So that should tell you that we are more or less like closer to what? Animals. Animals and humans, we share common ancestry. So if we share common ancestry, then there's nothing wrong if researchers study animals and transfer or generalize whatever information they get from animals onto humans. So this is one of the main reason they put up to justify why we should use animals in certain research or experiments. Okay. Okay, so this captures what I've already explained. Then we have something known as the structure of the central nervous system. So the central nervous system, as you already know, the anatomy, it consists of the brain and the spinal cord. The brain and the spinal cord. So they also argue that both humans and animals, we all have similar brain and spinal cord. So for instance, this is the brain of a chimpanzee. When you look at the brain of a chimpanzee and this brain, which is the brain of a human, you can see that it is quite similar. We all have similar tissues. Even this dolphin brain is quite similar. So this is the argument they are making, that, oh, even when you check the brain regions of animals and humans, it's quite similar. So we all share the same tissues, the same structure, and the same function of the brain. So according to them, since we all have the same brain and spinal cord, then there's nothing wrong if we study animals and later say, okay, whatever information we got from these animals is the same behavior or trait humans have, because we all have the same structure of the brain and the same function. The function of the frontal lobe of an animal is the same as human. So according to them, these people have the same structure of the central nervous system, then it's okay if we first study animals and later say, oh, whatever behavior we saw in these animals is the same as. I beg, as I've been saying, please, the moment you join, try as much as possible to mute. The moment you join, please mute your mic. Okay. So let me move on. So please, if you have a question, kindly use the emoji to raise up your hand, and the time I would give you opportunity. So I think Madam Becky Bynum, your hand is up.
Sir, good evening.
Good evening.
Hello, sir. Good evening.
Good evening. Please go ahead.
Please, I'm lost. I don't know. Please, I don't know if I'm in the right class. I don't know if this level 300 midwifery class, because yes. I'm a bit lost.
You are in the right class, please.
You're in the right class.
Okay. Okay.
All right. So that's all. Let's move on to the next one. Then they also argue that, okay, we have something known as the principle of parsimony. Those who agree that we should use animals in research. According to them, they believe that if two assumptions or two, so what they are saying is that if we have two main assumptions in mind, one is really, really simple than the other. One is simple, one is complex. And these two assumptions explains the same phenomenon. Then it is better if we select the simpler one. So what they are saying is that always, when doing anything, we are supposed to select the simplest one. We are supposed to select the simplest one. So according to them, if we are saying, back in SHS or JHS, integrated science, we normally say that, oh, humans are higher order animals. I don't know whether you've come across this. We normally say, oh, humans are higher order animals, whereas animals are lower order animals. We normally say humans are higher order animals. Animals are lower order animals. These are the main terms. Madam Rita, your hand is also up. What's happening? Please unmute your mic and speak, Madam Rita. Okay, so I'm assuming it is by mistake, so I'm continuing. Yes, please go ahead.
Hello, sir. Please, which class are we? I'm confused.
What are you confused about? You're in the class.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So humans are lower order animals than humans are higher order animals and animals are lower order animals. So these are the two main things. So per the principle of parsimony, if we are to select these two, then we should go in for the simpler one, which is the lower order animals. That's animals in itself. So to them, there's nothing wrong if we first select animals, then whatever information we get from these animals, we then transfer or generalize it into the entire human race. They feel there's nothing wrong in that regard. Okay. Let me erase this. Then one also important thing about these things are that in most situations, when conducting any research using animals, you don't need consent from anyone. You don't need consent from anyone. It means that you don't need any approval from anyone that, oh, I want to conduct a study on so and so. In most situations, when conducting a study on humans, you need to go through a series of steps. First, you need to go to the person, tell him or her that, oh, I want to conduct a study on you. and this is what the study is all about. Then afterwards, you need to explain the benefit and the risk the person would get, even how you would ensure that, okay, his details wouldn't come out or nobody would know that it is him or her. So you need to give him all sorts of assurance of confidentiality and anonymity. Then after the person, you've given the person assurance, you brief the person what the study is all about. They need to also seek approval. That's a consent. Seek approval from the person that, oh, I want you to conduct this study. I want you to be part of this study. Do you really want to be part? Then the person needs to agree. The person can decide to agree or disagree. So it means what they are saying is that
Good evening.
using
I
animal.
want guitar boys. Guitar boys, Amani.
So using humans, you need to go through all forms of all types of procedures. But when it comes to animals, they are just there. They are available, readily available. You don't need their consent. You don't need to say, oh, Mr. Mouse, I'm conducting this study. I want to conduct this study on you. There's the risk involved and so on and so forth, and get approval from it. Since they are there, you just catch it, use it. So that's one of the main reasons they justify, saying, oh, these animals are readily available and you don't need any consent from them. So it is much easier to use animals in certain experiments rather than humans. So another thing they also emphasize on is the cost in using humans in research. So they are saying, if you are conducting an experiment whereby if you use a human or use an animal, you would arrive at the same conclusion, or you get the same information. Then it's much better if you use animals, because with animals, you don't have to compensate them. Certain research, you have to pay your participants, even where they will sleep, the accommodation, especially if the person is coming from a long distance area. So let's say the participant is in Wa, and the research is done in, say, Kumasi. So that means the person needs to travel all the way from Wa to Kumasi. And the person traveling, since it is a research, that means you, the person who is conducting the research, that's the researcher or the experimenter, you have to pay the person, you have to compensate. Also, when the person comes, you need to get accommodation for the person and all that. So we are saying in certain research, if we using animals, we would arrive at the same conclusion. Then it's better if we use animals, because with animals, it minimizes cost. You don't have to you don't have to find some luxurious accommodation for the person. You just cage the animal. You don't have to also pay the animal, like compensating in terms of transportation and everything. So to them, the cost involved, if the cost is too high using humans, and ideally when you use animals, you get the same information from, then it's much better if you use animals in some of these research works. Then other reasons they give has to do with ethical reasons. What they are saying is that in certain experiments, you can't just use, say, humans.
Sir, please, I've got a question.
Okay, now please go ahead.
My question is, I didn't understand how the principle of parsimony explains why psychologists will use animals to work. Because if a theory is supposed to use simple definitions, what's the relationship between that and animals?
Okay, so as I was saying, if that theory in itself explains the thing in its simplest form for the mass, for people to get to grasp, because whatever theory or model or principles you are coming out with, you are not you didn't develop that theory solely for maybe some specific individuals that would understand you. You want the entire human race to understand what the theory is all about. So what they are saying is that if coming up with a theory, then it means that it is better if you use the simplest form in itself, because, and in using its simplest form, or in narrowing it down to the use of animals in research, what they are saying is that the same thing. If we have two different proposition, like we are saying humans are higher order animals because of the theory of evolution. We are saying humans are higher order. We are the highest on the evolutionary ladder. That means we are higher order animals. Then animals are lower order animals. Then, per the principle of parsimony, since animals are the lowest rank, then it means that we are supposed to first conduct a study on the lowest rank, because they are the simplest organisms that we could easily understudy them well, rather than first just going in for the complex ones, which is higher order animals. Because to them, per the evolutionary ladder, we are all coming from the same parent. So if one is higher than the other, or one is more complex than the other, then going for the simplest one. Then afterwards, you can transfer whatever information you get from them to the complex organism. That's the main thing they settle on, using the principle of parsimony. All right. So I think another person hand is up. Christian. So I would give opportunity for him to ask. Then afterwards I'll move. So please go ahead. It's up. Mr. Christian, we could barely hear you. All right, so I think maybe something is wrong with your mic. So please do well to work on it. Or you can put your question on the chat room section. Later I would retrieve. Okay. So the next one is the next read.
Okay, the parsimony. Out for the lady.
Please go ahead.
Parsimony for the lady.
Yep. Please, in order not to delay the class, kindly put it at the chat room section for me. I'll later retrieve. All right. So another reason they give is ethical reasons. So what they are saying is that in certain experiments, it is highly unethical, it is immoral, or it is not even right to use humans in the first place. A typical example is what I earlier gave, whereby we want to find out specific brain regions, how the brain functions. You can't just pick a human being, then you dissect the brain, like you are killing the human, dissect the person's brain, then check to see which area is responsible for, which area in the brain is responsible for, say, memory or emotions and what have you. Or let's say the example that I gave within the slides is you want to study how substance use works within the brain, like marijuana. You can't just expose anyone, humans, and so I want you to smoke weed. Then afterwards, I will take brain scans of the weed that you smoke and find out how the weed really affected your brain. That is highly unethical, because whatever research or experiment you are doing, make sure that the risk involved on the people you selected is really, really minimal. And this is a risky thing, because substance use is something that really have negative consequences on our brains. So in certain experiments, we can't use humans. Example is this one. But with animals, you can just expose maybe the rats into marijuana. Then afterwards, you then dissect or do use brain scans to check how the marijuana really affected this rat's its brain. So that's one of the arguments they usually bring about. All right. So please give me some few minutes. My laptop is running low. Okay. All right. Another argument they also raise has to do with certain. They also find and indicate that even certain studies could cause irreversible damages if humans are normally used. Certain studies, like if we are testing for new drugs, it could cause irreversible damages. When you say irreversible, it means permanent damages to the brain, especially if humans are first used. A typical example is, say, we want to, like the COVID-19 vaccine that came about. Before the COVID-19 vaccine arrived or came into existence, it had to go through a series of tests before they said, oh, this vaccine is safe for humans to use. So it going through a series of tests, which organisms do you think they will use? They can't just use humans, or can't test it on humans. So rather, they are supposed to first test it on what? On animals, to see how it works within these animals. So let's say, as a pharmaceutical company, I have manufactured a new vaccine. And the vaccine that I've manufactured, okay, it has gone through the first stage. I don't know its main side effects. So what they normally do is that these vaccines or drugs are first injected or given to these animals, so that they will understudy the animals to see how the animals will react to these drugs or vaccines, so that they will know the potential side effects of all these things and find ways to reduce them. But to test for this, you can't just select any human or a human and say, oh, I'm injecting these new supposedly vaccine or drug to see how you react, so that it will be beneficial to the entire people after you die or after it causes some permanent damages. So ideally, to them, they believe that it is better if we first use it on animals to see how they react to some of these drugs or vaccines. Then later, adjustment will be made till it is safe for humans to use. Okay. Then they also say that how even animals learn, or how they are motivated or rewarded. When you do a study to find out how animals learn certain behaviors and how they are motivated or rewarded, the behaviors they exhibit is quite the same as humans. So it means in certain studies, which has to do with how people learn or how they are rewarded or motivated, we can similarly use animals, because we all have common behavioral patterns in some of these aspects. So it is okay if we use animals in some of these aspects to understand human behaviors. So basically, these are some of the things, arguments they want to bring about in terms of using animals in research. Okay, so for now, if you have any question, as I've been saying, kindly use the emoji to raise up your hand, and I'll later give you opportunity. So, Mr. Christian, I think you raise up your hand and it's off. So I don't know. Okay, I'm continuing. So the next one is the other pole, those who are against using animals in research. Those who are against using animals in research. So in most situations, most of the reasons they brought about was a way to rebut people who were in support of using animals in research. So the first thing that they talk about has to do with culture. So what they are saying is that whatever being the case, culture plays an important role in terms of human behavior. So you could see that in terms of culture, our emotions and even how we communicate is entirely different from animals. Our feelings, how we communicate with ourselves and everything, to them, they believe that it is entirely different from animals. So if we have differences in terms of these aspects, then why should we use animals in the first place and say, oh, whatever information we got from these animals is quite related to humans? To them, they feel since we have variations in this, it's not useful for us to first study animals in the first place or use them in experiments. So a typical example that I gave within the diagram is human language is culturally transmitted or taught. So to them, they believe that when it comes to humans, we learn languages as we move on. It is transmitted to us by significant others like parents. As we observe our parents and everything, we learn some of these behaviors, languages. But in terms of animals, they communicate largely with signs, which is an inborn thing. So this is the argument they bring about. So to them, if even in terms of language, we have variations or differences in them, then why should we first of all study these animals and say whatever information we've gotten from them is a true reflection of humans? All right. Then they use the theory of evolution argument to also rebut that. Oh, if you are saying we are all coming from the same period, the same ancestor, if you are telling us that humans and animals are all coming from the same ancestry, then we are more or less like the same brothers and sisters. So it means what is not good for the goose is also not good for the gander. Yet at the same time, we are all created equally. If you are telling us that, okay, we are coming from the same ancestry, then it means we are created equally. So if you are telling us that, it is not right for humans to be treated in certain ways, like, okay, we dissecting their brains and all that, then it is equally not right or unacceptable for us to use animals and also kill them and dissect their brains inhumanely. So this is the argument they bring up. All right. Then the next one, let me move on. Okay. So the next one is using lab animals. So those who are in support, scientists who are in support of using animals in research, you can see that most of them cage or domesticate the animals that they want to use in their research. So you can see with the diagram, this is a rat. These are rats that have been domesticated or caged. So those who are against caging these lab animals and using them in research, what they bring about is that caging these rats is highly unnatural, because when you cage these rats, they don't have opportunity to move about. You know, usually animals, when they roam about, they are not confined. They themselves will be the ones that will search for their own food, for instance. They are the ones that will search for their own food. They know certain behaviors they need to exhibit to find their own food. But the moment you domesticate a lab animal, it means that the lab animal wouldn't be able to what? Move about to search for its own food. You'll be the one feeding it. So what they are saying is that since these lab animals are domesticated and they don't even fend for their own food or move about to learn certain behaviors or certain corners they need to dodge when they see people and all that, then it means that whatever information that we are getting from these lab animals wouldn't be real, like if they were in their natural setting, if they were in their natural area. So hence, these lab animals, information that we are getting from them is not even a true reflection of how humans behave. Because if you are telling us that animals and humans, we behave in similar fashion, and you've domesticated an animal, then it means that even that animal alone, whatever behaviors we've gotten from them is not a true reflection of if they were in their wild setting, wild area or natural setting. So hence, we can't even transfer the information to humans in the first place. Okay. Then they also rebut those who support the fact that we should use animals in research, where they said, oh, we all have the same central nervous system. So those who again argue that, nope, it's not always the case that we all have the same brain and spinal cord. So they argue that when you check, especially one of the key animals which is used in research, which is a rat, when you check the brain of a rat, when you compare it with the brain of a human, there is vast difference. There's a vast difference. So even when you check it in a structural form, a structure alone, you see that there's a vast difference. So what they are saying is that even we don't have the same structure of the brain, rat and human. So why should we first of all study this rat brain? Then whatever information we are getting from the rat, we are saying, oh, it is also a true reflection of a human brain. So to them, it doesn't work like that, because even when you check the structure of the rat brain, it's not similar to humans. So it means whatever behavior these rats are behaving will be entirely different from humans. So no need for us to understand these animals and generalize their information to the entire human race and say, that's how we also behave. Okay. So generally, what they are saying is that whatever information we are getting from these animals, they are not really useful, because per the argument, even the structure of the brain is unrelated. We are different beings altogether. So that's what they are saying. We are different species of beings altogether. So as they are saying, animals are animals and humans are humans. So whatever information that we gain from these animals wouldn't be relevant to humans in that regard. So basically, this is the argument they wanted to spring up in terms of using animals in research works. Okay, so please, any question? Any question in terms of the use of animals in research? Any question or clarification? All right. Okay, Amina Ibrahim, so please Unmute your mic and speak. Madam Amina, please go ahead.
So, based on these arguments and what they are saying, so which people are now winning this thing? Because looking at this, I think it has to be the same. Animals are animals and humans are humans. So they're using animals to test several versions of before using it on humans. It's not all right. We are at risk. So I think we.
Amina, thank you. But if the main thing is, I'm not here to take sides. Even coming from science realms, most of us would skew towards using animals in research, because using these animals in research has really, really benefited us significantly. Like a key example that I use was even the current COVID-19. Without we using animals in most of these experiments, who would have volunteered to say, oh, okay, we are trying to bring out a new drug. We've been able to, chemistry-wise, we've been able to calculate or, yes, mix one or two ingredients together. But I want to really test to see its potency. Who would dare to take up that risk and say, okay, I want you to use me as what? As a lab rat. So ideally, animals are readily available for us to use them. Then whatever information we get, we know that, okay, if also a human being is injected the same thing, this is the same experience he or she would go through. So hence, let's do some adjustment and try to reduce the side effects. So to some extent, reusing animals is really important. It has saved a lot of life. All right. So, Madam Mary.
So please, my question is it the psychologist arguing with the scientists, or who is arguing on this? Is it the psychologist arguing with the scientists, or?
Not necessarily, because psychologists also use animals in research. Most of the brain experiments that I earlier indicated were done by series of psychologists in that regard, HM situation and all that. But the key thing is that what I'm saying is those who are against, they are more or less, we call them friends of animals. So it's some humanitarian individuals that are seriously against we hurting animals. I don't know whether let me mute all of you. I don't know whether any of you watch soccer and you've come across this person known as Jacob Zuma. He used to be a Chelsea player, and I think he currently plays for one of the teams. I think either Everton or something. And last year, for instance, there was something trending on social media whereby he kicked his own cat. I think maybe the cat was misbehaving or something. Then he kicked it. And it seems when he was kicking it, I don't know, maybe a friend or something was recording, and it was trending on social media. These animal rights individuals took it upon themselves, took Zuma to court, and he had to pay some fines for causing harm towards these animals. So these are a specific group of individuals, not necessarily scientists, because no scientist would skew the attention towards that. But they are a specific group of individuals who believe that, using or hurting animals in the first place is really bad. So they've come up with a series of arguments, seriously protesting. Some even go to the extent of even harming or threatening scientists who normally use animals in their labs and all that. They go to the extent of doing that. All right. So any other question concerning the use of animals in research? Any other question? Oh, okay. So if there are no questions, then I'm moving on. So the next one is that we'll be doing is para and pseudo-psychology. Para and pseudo-psychology. So you remember last time that we met, I told you psychology is a science and it follows some systematic procedures. Sometimes when people see certain things done by some individuals, they think that it is also part of psychology. So I just want us to also find out certain things that are done by people which we believe that is not really what scientific in the first place, and it doesn't fall within the realms of psychology. So the first one that we know of is parapsychology. And the word para, it is a Greek word, which means beyond. So that means the term parapsychology means beyond psychology. Then the word pseudo is also a Greek word, and it means false. So that's why we have false psychology. So pseudo-psychology means false psychology. So these two terms, we normally say they are not part of psychology, and they are unscientific means of what? Of getting information from. They are unscientific means of acquiring knowledge. So let's try and find out why we are saying it is unscientific, because these two things, you can't really verify. It cannot be verified. It cannot be replicated. You know, one of the key characteristics of any science is that it should be repeated or replicated. But when it comes to these two things, you can't really repeat them to get the same conclusion. All right, so let's go through some things that falls under, for instance, parapsychology. So as I said, para means beyond. So it means with para, we are saying it goes beyond our 5 sense organs. So sometimes parapsychology is sometimes referred to as extra sensory perception. It goes beyond, when perceiving it or when interpreting it, it goes beyond our 5 sense organs. So sometimes referred to as extra sensory perception. All right. So in terms of parapsychology, we have several of them, but I decided to stick to 4 of these. We have different types. We have telepathy, clairvoyance, precognition, psychokinesis, and others. But we'll just focus on 4 of these. 4 of these. All right. So let's try and find out what these things really mean. So the first one under parapsychology is telepathy. Telepathy. So the way I define telepathy, I said this is known as thought transfer from one person to the other, from one person to the other, without the mediation of any known channel of communication. So one is said to experience this when a thought you have or something you are thinking also occurs to another person at the same time. So it's more or less like with telepathy, we are saying, oh, it's like you are thinking of something, you have something in mind. Then without you communicating it to another person through maybe phone or in social media or any other known mediation, the thought that you had in mind, at the same time, that person also have the same thinking patterns in mind. You become surprised. You say, hey, are they, how are you thinking? How did you go to know that this is what I'm thinking of? A typical example is, and it normally happens to us, a typical example is, so when you check the diagram, you can see that the first diagram, it's more or less like this is you are thinking about something, and what you are thinking, you've transferred it to this person at the same time. A typical example is, let's say you've really missed a friend for a long time, or you've seen something that reminds you of a friend, and you want to discuss that same information with that friend at a particular period. Then all of a sudden you will see your friend calling you, your long time friend that you've missed for a longer period, and you want to share a particular information with. Then all of a sudden that friend will be calling you, and the same friend would also be will be sharing the same information that you were thinking about. When it happens like that, you begin to wonder, why is it that that's what I was thinking, I have just transferred it to that friend at that point in time. That becomes a typical telepathy. Or ideally, you've just missed a friend for a longer period. Then all of a sudden, you begin to call the person. The moment you pick a phone to call the person, you could see the person also calling, as if like you just communicated to the person that, oh, I've missed you, so call me. So when it happens like that, then it becomes a typical telepathy in that regard. All right. Then the next one. Let me erase this. Okay, so I think Suleimana, your hand is up. Suleimana Francis.
I just want to relating to what you've said, okay. And I want to find out, like, assuming I have a friend, and then maybe we are to go to some place, okay, but he's far away from me, and I was thinking that, like, if I get to this place and my friend is there, we would have go to that place. Then maybe all of a sudden, or coincidence, I got there and my friend is also there. Can we also relate it to that?
To some extent, like, okay, you didn't communicate it to him that, okay, be there, yes, be at that spot. But it's like what you were thinking, your friend is also thinking in the same fashion. So that's a typical telepathy. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Then the next one is clairvoyance. Clairvoyance. So I'm reading. This is the ability to see what is happening at a particular place at a certain time without having prior knowledge of the event. This is really critical, the term without having any prior knowledge of the event. It involves being able to see or give an account of an ongoing event at another place, irrespective of the distance and barrier. So as I said, the key thing is, a key ingredient is the absence of prior information of the event. So basically what you are saying is that with clairvoyance, it's more or less like you are able to give full account of what is happening at a particular place. What is currently happening at a particular place, whereby by distance, you are not even there, but you are giving full account about what is really happening without you having any previous knowledge about the fact that, okay, this would really happen, or nobody has called you to brief you that, okay, this is what is really happening. But you are just giving full account as if you are there, and the thing is happening and you are telling us. So a typical example is, let's say you are in war at the moment. You don't know what is really happening at the moment in, let's say, the president's office, or let's say in my house. You don't know what is really happening at the moment. Let's say we are not lecturing you, and I've not switched on my audio or video or CCTV camera or whatsoever. You don't have access to any of these things, or you haven't really called me for me to tell you that, okay, this ABC and this is what is really happening. A friend or nobody has also communicated it to you. But you being at war, you are able to give full account of what I'm doing, the kind of things that is really happening in my house and all that. Then it becomes a typical what? Clairvoyance in that regard. Okay, so Madam Obapa Amponsa.
Hello, sir.
Yep.
Please, concerning this clairvoyance,
Yeah.
in this setting of ours, is it not going to be attributed to spirituality?
So that's what I'm saying.
Or-
That's what, yes, in certain situations, we might say, oh, this has to do with spiritual dimension. So that's what I'm saying. These things are not unscientific, they are unscientific, and they don't really fall within psychology in the first place.
Okay.
Because we can't really explain how it happens, and even you can't really repeat it in other areas. So it is unscientific means. Okay. Okay, so I think someone asked a question at the chat. Can you also consider a situation where you are talking with someone, then suddenly you both speak at the same time, saying the same thing as telepathy? Yes, because it's more or less like you are both thinking about an issue. You haven't really discussed that issue beforehand. If you haven't really discussed that issue beforehand, then you're all thinking at the same time. Then all of a sudden you speak about the same thing. Then it becomes telepathy, because there's no prior information or knowledge. All right. So I'll give opportunity for two of you to ask your question. Then afterwards I'll move on. So Pauline, please.
Thank you, sir. I'm not familiar with the clairvoyance. Please.
Okay. Then Madam Priscilla, please unmute your mic.
Okay, thank you. Sir.
Oh, sorry. Please go ahead. Oh, please unmute your mic. I think I mistakenly muted. Yeah.
Okay. Hello, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What about if we're able to see things before it happens? Like, you're able to see something before it happens. So when the thing actually happens, you have already seen it. As in,
yes. So that would be another thing. That would be another thing altogether.
Okay. Thank you so much.
All right. All right. So let me move on. Then I think someone indicated she's not that clear with the clairvoyance. So what I'm saying is that with the clairvoyance, the incident is really happening at the moment. It is currently happening, and you are giving full account about what is really happening, without you having any prior knowledge, before knowledge, like, okay, someone calling you to tell you that, oh, this is what is really happening at that place. The typical example is maybe there's something significantly happening at Accra Mall. Let's say Accra Mall, there's fire outbreak at that place. You have no idea. Nobody has called you to tell you, or you didn't read it on newspaper, or you didn't watch it on radio, television, and all that. Then all of a sudden, you begin to tell us that, oh, Accra Mall, something bad is really happening at Accra Mall. The place is burning. And you are giving full account about what is really happening that needs to be sorted. Then it becomes a typical clairvoyance, because the incident is happening and you are giving full account. Okay. So Madam Linda, I'll give you opportunity later, it seems, or else I'll be. Most of you, I think 3 of you have raised up your hand. So let me continue on. Afterwards, I will give opportunity for you to ask your questions and all that. All right. So the next one is precognition. Precognition. So normally students confuse precognition with clairvoyance. So like one of your colleagues asks a question, which I said we'll come to it later. That's typically precognition. So with precognition, you are able to predict or foretell an event that will happen in future without you having any prior knowledge about the incident. So typically, it's more or less like you prophesying that, oh, A, B, C, and D would happen to you in future. That's a typical precognition. That's a typical precognition. So someone might ask, so does it mean someone, you know, I hope all of you know population census, right? So, you know, every 10 years, Ghana Statistical Service, they count the number of people and even the structures that we've put up and all that. They count everything. Then afterwards, they will give an estimate. They'll predict that, okay, in the next 10 years, our population rate or growth will be, say, this percentage. So they're making this estimate or prediction. Can we say that it is precognition? That's a question to the class. Can we say it is also precognition?
No, sir.
Why not?
No.
Why? So please, any clue as to why it is not part of precognition?
Sir.
Okay.
Hello, sir.
Yes, please go ahead.
Please, sir, if it is predicted that Ghana's population in 2023, maybe they give a certain number, it may not be accurate.
Okay, so your argument is that it may not be accurate. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So I think the first person who raised up the hand was Madam Miss, Ahasa Hawahu. Ahasa Hawahu.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
You said with precognition, the person doesn't have prior knowledge about what he is prophesying. But with population census, you have to do certain research and other things before you come out with those data and predict. You are able to predict what will happen to the next 10 years population, about the population. But with precognition, there's nothing like any knowledge. You just come naturally.
The key thing here, although they are making a prediction of all right, but the key thing is that they have a prior knowledge. So that's why I said they've made previous estimates. Like, okay, they are basing the argument on what? On something like the 2020 population census. After their calculations and everything, they would use that as basis to say, oh, in the next 10 years, our growth rate will be what? Will be, say, this percentage. So that means they are basing their prediction on a particular what? On a particular information, prior information. So that wouldn't make it what? A prediction. Sorry, that wouldn't make it a prophecy or a precognition in the first place. So that's a distinction I want you to really get it well. All right. Madam Linda, please go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to just say what you have said, because the person is having data, and it is based on the data he's using to predict what will happen in future.
All right.
So it's not the precognition.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you too. Okay, so I'm moving on. Oh, what's happening? Okay. Okay. So the next one is psychokinesis. Psychokinesis. So psychokinesis, we are seeing it simply means power over the mind over matter. That's the ability of an individual to exert influence over inanimate and animate objects and animate object by willpower. Others call it mental influence over physical events without the intervention of any known physical force. So you could see this normally, these magicians normally do it a lot. They wouldn't touch or use any of their hands or body to touch the objects, but will be conjuring certain incantations. Then all of a sudden, you see the object moving or flying or something. So that's a typical psychokinesis. We are saying what they are doing. We can't really verify as to whether it is accurate or not. It is something that cannot be replicated by other humans or individuals. So hence, it doesn't fall within the realms of science. It is highly unscientific, and it's not part of psychology, as sometimes people assume. Okay. So please, that's all when it comes to parapsychology. So the next one is pseudo-psychology. Pseudo-psychology. So as I earlier opined, pseudo means false psychology. So normally, since it is false psychology, it means it is something that is fake, it is unsubstantiated, and usually we can't also verify it. It is something that is not verifiable, or we can't really repeat the same thing. So in terms of pseudo-psychology too, within your slides, I indicated 3 types, but I would add another one to it, making 4. So although it wouldn't be part of your slides, I'll just echo on it. So kindly pay attention towards that. So we have these ones. We have Graphology, Palmistry, Phrenology. Then the 4th one is Astrology. Astrology. So these are the various types. We have several of them, but these are the various types you should know of. These are the various types you should know of. Okay, so let's go through what each of them means. So the first one is Graphology. Graphology. So I'm reading. The belief that one's handwriting reveals one's personality traits and could be used to predict job performance. Note, this is different from an aspect of forensic psychology in which an expert in handwriting can determine one's signature. So it means with graphology, it relates to using the size, slit, and other aspects of handwriting to make predictions about the person. So what we are saying is that with graphology, it's more or less like some people will just look at someone's handwriting and say, oh, when it comes to this person, this is his personality. He's ABC. So let's check the diagram that I just have uploaded on your right hand side. You could see they are interpreting that, okay, looking at this handwriting, the person has unresolved issue with the daddy. Then they also say, oh, looking at this handwriting, for instance, this person is what? Stubborn and vanity. Then let's check this handwriting. They are saying, oh, when it comes to this handwriting, the person is fast and intelligent. So mostly some people will use just the handwriting of a person to indicate that, oh, this person will be intelligent and so and so. And I think even in our context, we sometimes use this. When someone has bad handwriting, we just assume that, oh, this person, looking at his handwriting, he might be in what? In the medical field. Because it is assumed that, okay, when it comes to all physicians who prescribe medications, their handwriting are bad. So that's why when they are prescribing, you can't really see. It is eligible for you to see. Okay. It is not eligible, sorry, for you to see. Then what we are also saying is that for the second bullet, note, this is different from an aspect of forensic psychology in which an expert in handwriting can determine one's signature. So we are saying that this is entirely different from an area in psychology whereby someone has specialized in knowing that, oh, this is this person's handwriting. And as a result, he's the one who even committed this crime, and so and so. So a typical example is in mental health. You know, when someone commits suicide, and first of all, the person writes a suicide note. A suicide note. Ideally, we are supposed to recruit a forensic psychologist. For the forensic psychologist to deduce as to whether it is the person who is dead who really wrote that note, or there's a crime being committed whereby someone has killed a person and has intentionally written a note indicate just to fake it like, okay, the person committed suicide. So ideally, if we have an expert doing that, we can say that the person is doing what? Graphology. Because in this aspect, for the person to arrive at a conclusion and say, oh, this is the person who committed the crime and so on and so forth, they even have to go through previous written notes of the victim, of the person who is dead. They need to go through previous written notes to check and compare it with the current suicide note and see if it's the same, the way it has been slanted in terms of the written patterns. Is it the same, and so on and so forth. So it means they are basing their argument based on what? Prior information. So we can't necessarily say that, okay, it is a typical what? Graphology. And this prediction they are making is something which is replicable. We can easily replicate it. All right. So that's all when it comes to graphology. I'm moving on. The next one is palmistry. Palmistry. With palmistry, some people just use the lines or the patterns within a person's palm to say, oh, looking at this person's palm, the way the lines, the pattern of the line is, I believe that this person is intelligent. I believe that, oh, this person is a reserved person, or this person will be a great man or woman in future. So they are using the lines within the palms to foretell the person's destiny or even personality. And that's also a false psychology. It doesn't fall within psychology. We are saying it is a false or a fake thing that they are doing. All right. Then the next one, which is really common in our context, is we using the shape of the skull, especially the bump. When I say the bump, at the back of your head, in P, we call it ubi etiko, the bumps. We normally say that, oh, if someone has a big head or a long bump, then it means that, oh, this person is really intelligent. Oh, that's some of the things we normally say. But if someone has a small head, a flat bump, we sometimes say, oh, it might be that, okay, he'll be an average, his intelligence level is average or even very, very profound or poor. We sometimes skew, especially intelligence, using that thing. So what we are saying is that this is also something which is unsubstantiated, and it is a typical phrenology. It is a typical phrenology, which it is a fake thing that we are doing, because it's not always the case whereby someone who has large bump or long bump would be intelligent. Intelligence has nothing to do with your skull, the shape of your skull, but rather the tissues within your brain is the one that really determines. All right. So these are some of the criticisms or weaknesses in terms of para and pseudo. So you can see that I've been saying frequently that, okay, it is something that we can't really repeat or replicate. Some of the ways and means in which they arrive and say, okay, this is this person's personality. In most situations, that's not so. When you check two people and they all have the same line pattern, it's not always the case that, okay, they will all have the same personality, like the way these people because believe. So for instance, if they say, oh, if someone has an L shape, it means the person is reserved. It's not always the case that, okay, someone who has an L shape or an L-shaped palm, I'm just using it as an example. It's not always the case that the person will be reserved in that regard. So it makes it quite difficult for you to repeat whatever methods they use to arrive at a conclusion. And what we are saying is that some of these methods they use to arrive and say, okay, this is this person's personality or this person's destiny. Some people, some unscrupulous individuals have been using it as a way to also defraud others because their methods are not always, does not always work like how they want people to believe in that regard. Okay. So please, any question? Any question? All right, Madam Georgina.
Yes,
Please.
sir, please. You said you had astrology to it, but you haven't given explanation.
Yeah, so I'll come to the astrology. Thanks so much. Thanks for drawing my attention to it. Yeah. So the next one is astrology. Thanks so much. So with the astrology, what we are saying is that some people usually use the position of the stars, star and stroma, the stars, to foretell people's destiny or future. They just use how the star is positioned and say, oh, based on how the star is positioned, this is your what? Your traits. Maybe in future you'll be a great person and so on and so forth. And normally in social media, you come across something known as horoscope. Horoscope. Whereby this horoscope, they deduce it using the position of the stars to determine that, okay, February borns, let's say they have a horoscope known as Gemini. When you check on social media, you would get these things. Then they have another one known as Aquarius and others. So they will say, oh, when it comes to Gemini people, I don't know the month in which they are born, but I'm assuming that, okay, let's say they are saying Gemini people are born within February to March, January people are Gemini people. Then you will see they will indicate, oh, when it comes to Gemini people, they are reserved, they are kind, intelligent, all sorts of personality traits. Then they will indicate in that fashion. For them to come up with this, it means that they've read the position of the stars and they've indicated these things. But it's not always the case whereby someone who is a February or March born would have these personality traits they've indicated. So it makes it quite unsubstantiated, and it makes it quite difficult to replicate it. And that's one of the pseudo-psychology we are talking about. Okay. So that's all when it comes to astrology in that regard. Okay, I think someone's hand is up. Madam Faustina.
Hello, sir.
Yep.
Some people also believe the passage, they set your date of birth. Like if you are Monday born, what and what born, if you use those days in fasting, that it's necessary, like God answer your prayer than when you don't know those days. No. So I want to know whether this we can attribute it to the astrology.
To some extent, yes, you can attribute it to astrology because they are using the position of the stars and everything to do that. Yeah, in that regard. So it is quite related to the astrology aspect. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So please, any other thing? Any question or clarification concerning today's discussion? Okay. So I'll briefly highlight on fields of psychology. We wouldn't delve into it in details, but I'll just give you a brief hand about what next week we'll be doing. So we have a section known as, okay, Mr. Sorry, Abubakari Lauza. Abubakari.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Please, the astrology you talked of, is it part of the pseudo-psychology?
Yes, it's part of pseudo-psychology.
Thank you.
So under pseudo, we have graphology, palmistry, phrenology, then astrology.
Astrology, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome. Okay. So as I said, I'll just give you a brief intro about next week, what we'll be doing. So we have a section known as fields of psychology. So in terms of psychologists, we have different aspects of it. You'll find some psychologists in hospitals, others in organizations, others in the legal department, others in schools, and what have you, performing different functions or roles. Why? Because psychology is broad and people pursue different fields of it, or different aspects of psychology, which will lead them to a particular specialty. But irrespective of the specialty in psychology that they go through, they all make sure that they do similar things. They teach or conduct research, and apart from that, they transfer whatever information that they have, they've gotten over years to others. And also, apart from the obtaining these knowledges, they make sure that they use the information or knowledge they've acquired, they use it to help others, which is the application section. They use it to help others who are going through challenging times or situations. So generally, whatever specialty these psychologists find themselves in, we can divide their responsibilities into two main aspects. We have the basic field and applied field. So the basic field is what I'm saying. They make sure that they always on that research to increase knowledge and also impact those knowledge by even teaching them to others. When they do that, then we call it the basic field aspect. By instances whereby the knowledge that they've acquired, they then apply it or use it to help society or people who are going through challenging times. Then it becomes the applied field. So that's what I'm saying. The use of psychological principles and theories to overcome problems in life. Then it becomes the applied field. Okay, so God willing, next week, these are the subspecialties we'll be tackling. In terms of psychology, we have different subspecialties or fields, but I've just chosen some few of them for us to discuss. So for instance, with a clinical psychologist, you normally find them in hospitals. Then counseling psychologists, you find them especially in schools, performing different functions. Industrial, you find them in workplaces, especially at the human resource department. Then occupational health, you would also find them in the health sector, hospitals. Forensic psychologists, you find them at the legal department. Then engineering psychologists, you find them in the workplace at the engineering sector. Then educational, you find them in where? In schools or the educational sector. Then community psychology, find them in what? In communities, especially when you go to, let's say, the metropolitan assemblies and all that, you find them in such areas doing that, performing their roles. So God willing, next week, we will delve more to know the various functions or responsibilities of these subspecialties in that regard. All right. So please, any question? I think Madam Obapa, your hand is up.
Say, please, my question is on the research using animals and human beings.
Okay.
You made an example like the one on the animals. You said for the vaccine like this, they used animals to do the research. And then you made mention of the differences of the central nervous system. That one is different from the human aspect, is different from the animal one. So my question is, when exactly do we use animals and when exactly do we use human research?
It depends on the type of research that you are doing. It's an argument. So what I just spelled out the two arguments. Others who are against the use of animals, the reasons they give, and those who support using animals in research, the reasons they give. But if you want us to skew towards those who agree that we should use animals, they are saying that, first of all, our central nervous system are the same. So there's nothing wrong if we use what? Animals in those research. Then those who disagree, they are saying that, look, our central nervous system are not the same. Even some things, research that we do, it could cause some damages. So hence we shouldn't use them. So it is just an argument that they are making based on their reasons, the pole that you find yourself in. But in terms of me saying that, okay, this research, ideally we are supposed to use humans or animals, it all boils down to, in any research, you are supposed to find out the risk involved. If the risk is too much, like the example that I use, whereby they are saying, oh, in certain experiments, it is better for us to use animals. If it could cause, if we use animals, it could cause serious damage, then it is better for us to use animals. So for instance, the marijuana thing that I talk about, whereby I said, if we want to find out how, let's say, marijuana or even cocaine use could affect the brain, you can't just select humans, allow them to sniff cocaine or smoke marijuana. Then at the end, you would take them to the lab, check their brains to see how the cocaine really affected their brain. That's highly, highly unethical because it could cause serious harm or damage to their brain. So in this type of experiment, for instance, you can't use humans. So you go in for what? Animals. That's one of the justification, those who support that we should use animals in research. That's one of the justification they bring up. So it depends on the type of research that you are doing. That will determine as to whether you are supposed to use human or animal. If the risk is too high, don't use human, but rather animals. All right. So is there any other question? Any question? Okay. So assuming that there are no questions, so hence that'll be the end of today's meeting. So take care of yourself, and it was a pleasure having this meeting with you all. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Have
All
a
right.
nice.
Same to you. Bye.
Oh, sir, I have a question. Sir, please, I have a question.
Okay, Madam Josephine.
Thank
What
you.
question do you have?
Thank you for the opportunity, sir. So what if I avail myself that I would like to be used for an experiment for a fee? Is that accepted?
That's what I'm saying. It depends on the type of the experiment that you are doing. Whatever experiment you are doing, the researcher will weigh the risk involved. If the risk, that experiment is just a normal experiment whereby it wouldn't cause any damage to you, then fine, yeah. Because there are certain experiments where we use humans because it's perceived that the risk is really, really minimal. Maybe the person will just feel tired in the experiment. But if an experiment will cause maybe serious damages to you, then there's no way any researcher would even first of all do it and all that.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Hello, sir. Hello, sir.
Madam Georgina, yes, please go ahead.
Please, my light went off. So at the point of psychokinesis, everything went. I was understanding, but at that
Yes.
point, my
Sorry about that.
went off.
Sorry about that. Normally, after the class, I upload it on Google Drive or something.
So is it the audio or is it the audio or the?
No, it's the video. I'm recording at the moment. So whatever lecture that I'm recording, at the end, I'll upload it. Send a link to your course purposes.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay.
All right. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.